This watch hobby is a very scary place. And that's why I created this two-part series that basically allows you to confidently talk watches with anybody. And it crams in all the knowledge I wish I had as a beginner. We've all seen those other videos floating about online for beginner guides. And they're great, but the only problem is that they merely scratch the surface, and this is definitely going one step beyond that. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why the thumbnail says that Rolex is displaying the wrong time. I will be discussing the quirks and the less obvious things, the things that are not explicitly stated at the beginning of your watch journey in the second video. And if it hasn't already come out, you should probably turn the notifications on so that you get notified. Why even wear a watch, right? It's the 21st century. What's the purpose of having a little device on your wrist that tells you the time? If you want to know specifically why you should choose a traditional watch over an Apple Watch, I would definitely recommend checking out why you should throw out your Apple Watch. Essentially, the gist of the video is that you should buy a traditional watch for its heritage and its historical ties and its longevity. So essentially, the longevity allows you to grow a bond with a watch. And I know that might sound a little bit silly to some people who are just stepping into this hobby, but it really is interesting to think about that there is a product in this world that you can wear for the rest of your life. You can't say that about other products. For example, you're probably watching this on your phone. You replace your phone every 5 years or so. Whereas with a watch, it grows old with you, and you could probably even pass it down to your children. That's why they act as heirlooms. So I just find that part of a watch very interesting. There are two major types of movements in watches, and they're called quartz or mechanical. So what even is a movement? A movement, simply put, is a mechanism that powers the watch. So let's delve deeper into mechanical watches. So you have manual watches and automatic watches. There is a mainspring that you wind via the crown. No, the crown is not actually the one that you put on your head, although I wish watches did come with one of those. Just like the real deal, it kind of controls everything it's attached to. So the crown is just the knob on the outside of a watch that controls the date, the time, and it allows you to wind the watch. So once the spring is all coiled up, then it turns a bunch of gears in something called a gear train, and then it is sent to something called a balance wheel that oscillates at a constant rate, and this energy is then transferred to an escape wheel via a pallet fork. A pallet fork is kind of just like a fork, but it has two rubies on the ends, and the ubiquitous ticking comes from the pallet forks engaging with the escape wheel's teeth. If you have any questions, any comments, if you think I missed out on anything in this video, definitely tell me in the comments below, because I will be trying to respond to each and every one of your comments. Each rotation in a balance wheel is called a beat, and the average beat per hour for most watches is 28,800. It's 4 hertz. The first wristwatch was credited to Abraham Louis Breguet when he gave a wristwatch to the Queen of Naples. Watches, if you weren't aware, were actually a woman's only accessory, and then during World War I, people realized that time on your wrist is kind of convenient. Automatic watches. They are very similar to manually wound watches, except that they have a rotor and a ratchet system. So the great thing about automatic watches is that you don't have to wind the watch solely by the crown. There is a rotor. It is a weight in the back that allows you to wind the watch by just wearing it, because your natural movement and that kinetic energy spins the rotor and it winds it. It's kind of like a little hamster on the back of your wrist. Who is the automatic watch credited to? It's actually credited to Abraham Louis Perlet. He invented the first iteration of the automatic movement in 1770 in a pocket watch, and people actually thought it was way too expensive, and they thought that it was overrated. They were very wrong, because most watches in the 21st century are actually automatic if you're talking about mechanical watches. Quartz watches. On December 25th, 1969, Seiko released the world's first quartz watch, the Seiko Quartz Astron. So quartz watches are actually battery powered. So why do we call them quartz? There is a small quartz crystal in the movement that oscillates around 32,000 times per second, which is way more accurate than any other of the aforementioned mechanical movements. And this absolutely bamboozled the Swiss watch industry, since there was something cheaper and more accurate than their status quo mechanical movements. And this is exactly why the Swiss watch industry started to pivot their marketing of their mechanical watches to a more luxurious item. This actually means that you have to adjust the average mechanical watch about every month or so, if not more frequently. Mechanical watches can usually lose or gain up to 5 to 30 seconds per day. Your average dollar store watch is more accurate than the average Rolex. And you probably know about quartz watches, one way to identify it. Usually, seconds hand ticks across the dial, the face of the watch, instead of smoothly rotating around the dial. And kind of get into this obsession of the sweeping seconds hand in this second video. So you're probably thinking, why in the world would anybody spend thousands of dollars on a mechanical watch such as a Rolex if my dollar store watch can do the same thing and better? Well, I got 3 answers for you, each decreasing in sophistication. So the first one is the most sophisticated one, which is the mechanical watch kind of has a soul. It has a beating heart that oscillates back and forth, and a mechanical watch blurs the lines between human and machine. And you have this symbiotic relationship with it, especially for automatic watches, because when you stop moving, it stops moving as well. And the most honest answer, I think, is just that it's really cool knowing that your watch is displaying time without the use of a battery. And also, there is usually a sweeping seconds hand with mechanical watches that you just don't get with most quartz watches. Watch enthusiasts get very mesmerized by it. It is very irrational, but that is just the nature of this hobby. The important measurements are the case thickness, the dial diameter, the lug to lug, and the strap width. So the case is just the outer protective layer of the watch. The average case diameter ranges from 36 millimeters to 42 millimeters. And I know that sounds like a very small amount. When you actually put it on your wrist, you will see a difference. So a watch lug is where the strap, band, or bracelet attaches to the watch case. And lug to lug is measured from one lug to the other lug. A common lug to lug measurement is 42 millimeters to around 48 millimeters, sometimes maybe 50. And common strap widths are 18 millimeters, 20 millimeters, and 22 millimeters. If you want to know my subjective watch opinions on how a watch should wear, you should probably check out You Are Wearing the Wrong Watch. A complication is a feature of a watch that extends beyond just telling the time. Let's talk about a date complication. And you guessed it, it displays the date. What about date? It displays the day and the date. Chronograph, which is a glorified stopwatch, is just a stopwatch feature on your wrist. And then you also have a moon phase, which shows the current phase of the moon. Because as watch geeks would much rather look at our watch and see the moon phase instead of opening the curtain and looking outside. And then we also have a power reserve indicator, which indicates how much power is left in an automatic or just any mechanical watch. Then you also have GMT, which is Greenwich Mean Time, and it shows you the world time in different time zones, which usually ranges from 2 time zones to 3. And then you have an annual calendar, which adjusts for the months, because some months are 30 days, some months have 31 days, but you may need some adjusting for the month of February. And then there's also a perpetual calendar, which counts for the leap years. And then there's a tourbillon, which is a rotating cage that counteracts the effects of gravity on a watch's accuracy. This one is not super useful. It was mainly made for pocket watches, and then it was transferred to wristwatches, and essentially it just rotates the balance wheel. A minute repeater, which chimes the time on demand using bells, and the jump hour has an hour indicator that only moves when the minutes hand reaches 60 minutes exactly. Lume is a glow-in-the-dark material applied to watch hands, watch dials, and other parts of the watch. And at the very beginning of its development, watch lume was actually quite dangerous to not only the wearer, but also the person who applied the Lume, as Lume was actually created using radium, and radium is a very hazardous material. And if you want to check out the whole scandal went down in about the 1920s, it is quite interesting, but only after you're finished watching this video. But no need to worry, because Lume now is safe. Before, it was a necessary part of a watch as it glowed in the dark, and during war times that was very crucial. But now it's more like a glorified glow-in-the-dark toy. Bezels are basically this outer ring of a watch, and usually it serves a function. So diver bezels rotate unidirectionally to track elapsed dive time. You don't have to just track your dives, because I think most of us who own dive watches don't actually dive. Comment down below if you do. The GMT bezel allows you to track different time zones using a 24-hour markings. Then you have a tachymeter bezel, which are usually put on chronographs to track whatever you are measuring. If you have a car and you're measuring how fast it's going, you use a tachymeter. You also have different materials for bezels. Aluminum is the cheapest. It is the most basically lightweight, and it is the most prone to scratches. For vintage collectors, aluminum bezels are special because they can age. Same with copper bezels. Kind of treat for vintage watch collectors. Some people may not appreciate that, and that's why you have other bezels that are made of stainless steel or made of ceramic. Stainless steel is scratch resistant, it is very durable, and it's still cheaper than ceramic. And have ceramic, which is the most common type of bezel material for modern day sport watches, and it is the most scratch resistant. It is more expensive than the aforementioned materials. Hands include the minute hand, the seconds hand, and the hour hand, and they just rotate around the dial to help indicate the time. So straps on a watch basically are the part of a watch that help keep the watch body itself attached to your wrist. One of the most common types is leather. There are many different types of leathers you can choose from different animals, and you'll find leather straps on dress watches. You have NATO straps, which they're made of nylon, and they were actually made for the British Ministry of Defense in 1973. When in battle, if a spring bar popped out, if it got damaged, then basically this NATO strap would allow you to keep the watch body on your wrist. A very ingenious design, but let's be realistic here. The closest semblance of a battle that the modern day watch enthusiast will experience is an online fierce debate about whether Homages are actually clones. Colloquially known as a metal strap, but it's actually called a bracelet. Some of the most common types are Jubilee in Oyster style. Jubilee has 5 links in a row. Oyster style tends to have 3 links in a row, and the Oyster style bracelet tends to be on more tool-oriented watches, whereas Jubilee style bracelets are more formal. And then you have cloth and rubber. Rubber is used more on sporty watches. We have 3 main types of crystals. Sapphire, which is the most expensive. It has the best scratch resistance, but it is the most brittle, so you can shatter it more easily than the other crystals I'm going to talk about. You have mineral glass, which is cheaper. It has worse scratch resistance, but there is an asterisk there, as you can use polywatch to buff out the scratches, and it's less brittle than sapphire, and it is the most common type of crystal. And then we have acrylic, which is the cheapest. It has worse scratch resistance. You can still use polywatch to buff out the scratches, but it is made of shatter resistant material, which is a good thing. Water resistance. Now, it seems quite self-explanatory, but there are some things you should keep in mind. And the first being the units, of course, how it's measured. You have meters, bars, and atmospheres. And for every 10 meters, you have 1 bar or 1 atmosphere, approximately. When some watch says, for example, it has 30 meters of water resistance, it doesn't actually mean you can go swimming under 30 meters of water. Water resistance in watches just measures how much pressure a watch can withstand. So if you're swimming under 30 meters of water and you start moving your arms as you do when you swim, you are actually creating more than 3 meters of the water resistance that it was rated for. And there is, just to give you a sneak peek into the next video, there is this huge obsession with increasing how much water resistance a watch has, when realistically most watch enthusiasts who want 300 meters of water resistance, their deepest dive is just touching the bottom of their pool floor. But you should definitely not go swimming with a watch that says 30 meters of water resistance. Homages are watches that take inspiration from another watch and make their own spin of it. If you want to learn more about homages and the controversy around them, I have a specific video dedicated to that topic exactly. It's called the homage problem. So one thing we should keep in mind about dials is this thing called markers. So markers indicate the hours and sometimes minutes on a watch, and there are two types, applied and painted. Applied markers actually are separate pieces of material that are added onto a dial, and it's better for Lume application. It makes the dial look more 3D, and it's more expensive than the painted counterpart. The painted markers, which are 2D, they're generally less expensive and they have worse Lume application. Dial type. The main dial, which shows you the hours, the seconds, and the minutes most of the time, you can get it in a variety of different styles: matte, glossy, sunburst dials. Then you have sub-dials, which are smaller dials within the main dial. It usually indicates another measurement of time, such as the seconds, another chronograph hand, etc., etc. A skeletonized dial is a type of dial which basically allows you to see the movement behind the watch. You have an open heart, which allows you to see the balance wheel. There are different types of dial materials. You have metal, mother of pearl, carbon fiber. The most common metals are brass, stainless steel. They're durable and they can add a sporty look. And then you also have carbon fiber, which are more sporty and it can add some scratch resistance. And mother of pearl, as mentioned before, which are naturally iridescent materials and add some shimmer, some luxury to your watch. This magical word of horology, what does it even mean? But it is the study of timekeeping and the science of making mechanical watches. It is very beautiful, in my opinion. If you look in the history books, you learn about water clocks, you learn about sundials, and all these different civilizations trying to figure out the most accurate way of measuring time. It does relate to modern watches because you learn about the history of a watch. You're thinking, I learned enough about watches, what should I buy? So here are some of my recommendations, and my number one recommendation has to be a Casio. Casio as a brand, this is not endorsed, not sponsored by Casio. I've noticed that a lot of their watches are, first of all, really well made. They're very durable, they're inexpensive, and they just allow you to get your feet wet in this hobby, and you'll really fall in love from there. Some examples, right now I'm wearing my Casio A15AW. If you checked out my Instagram, which I definitely recommend checking out, I post about it all the time. I wear this everywhere. Again, they're beater watches, which basically just means I get to do whatever I want with them without really worrying about their durability, whether they can handle it. And you can also check out the Timex Expedition Scout for $38 because it, again, is inexpensive, it's by a reputable brand, and it just has an all-around good reputation. I have a whole bunch of different affordable alternatives and just some watches you should probably check out. They are affiliate links, but of course that doesn't incur any extra cost to you. Watch case materials. Stainless steel, it's the most common type of metal in this watch world. It is the cheapest and the most durable. It is the most utilitarian, but it doesn't have any innate value. And that's where gold watches come to play. Gold and platinum are very heavy metals. They just have a different luster. You also have titanium, which does lack the luster and the shininess that you get with stainless steel, with gold. But the benefits with titanium is that it is super durable and it is lightweight. We also have plastic, which is kind of the bottom tier of this materials list. Usually you find plastic watches at the $100 range or so at the max, because you're looking at swatches or kids watches. Thank you for making it to the end of this video. I truly appreciate it, especially since this video is longer than my normal content. If you want to check out some watch pics, I would definitely recommend checking out my Instagram. You can also take a look at my website if you want to read some blog posts ad-free. I really hope that this watch channel patinas like your favorite watch and it gets better and better over time. I'll see you in the next episode on the Time Ticker.